Yo, this is so fire that we're both wearing Hawaiian shirts, huh? Oh, right. Well, I know you want to get into the topic. This is something you're really passionate about. So what do you want to talk about when it comes to sex? Yeah, I'm very passionate about this topic. I thought we could start talking about, what sex is. I'm just playing Pablo. Okay, how about this? Let's talk about what sex is for. And this is going to be an important baseline for this video. So sex is for two things: unity and procreation. Unity in the sense that it allows two to grow closer to one another, but through God, and that's important. And the other part is procreation, and I think everyone knows what that is. I also want to mention what the opposite of love is. I can't remember if I talked about this in the other video, but the opposite of love is apathy. And that really, in a sense, is not caring about another person. And a child of apathy is to use. The opposite of love is not hate. It's actually really to use someone, just to not care about them. So I really wanted to establish that because it's going to help us talk about some other things. So I'm curious, how do you think sex kind of got so broken? Yeah, so there's two things when it comes to this. One is just the state of sex today in the popular culture, and the other is how we got here. And so if we start there, we got to go all the way back to the sexual revolution that I think sort of started, with Hugh Hefner and Playboy. There was this idea in marketing and advertising, that sex sells. And so he kind of did a brilliant thing, is that he, used nude women, attractive women, and combined that with kind of this classy business style that turned into this global brand that is Playboy. And there was also this rise of contraception. And the problem that they were trying to solve in terms of contraception was that only select families should be allowed to have kids, but that's for another day. But this feminist push as part of the sexual revolution was that men were not being faithful to their wives, and they were sort of sleeping around, and families were starting to be torn apart from this, and so women were like, well, I want that freedom too. And so there's this idea that sex didn't belong just in marriage, is that it should be for anyone who wants it, simply. And so the pill, the birth control pill, was introduced, and that kind of gave women this separation of responsibility that they usually have when a woman gets pregnant. And so that sort of tore up this idea that sex only belongs in marriage. And you can see from the 70s, 80s, and all the way up to today that we sort of blew the whole case wide open, and that sex is just, as long as it's consensual, it's okay, and that, everything is good. So this is something that I've struggled with. What's the problem with maybe having fun before marriage? Yeah, I think there's really two things that I want to focus about sex, and let's talk about the first one, and that is, why is it harmful to have sex before you're even thinking about marriage? To enter into the hookup culture when you're young, what's the damage there? It doesn't matter. I'm not going to be marrying any of these people. And when I go back to the selfish nature of sex and think about the ultimate selfish act of sex is masturbation, because how perverted it is that you're using yourself and other women on a screen to pleasure yourself. And the hookup culture, it's cringy to say, but it's kind of a dualistic form of masturbation, in a sense of two people just using one another for their bodies to have pleasure. And we talked about that in the video about love. That's really this first layer of sex love. And when we talk about personal love, that maybe could be in the forms of dating or marriage, and something a little more committal, we find that all of this selfish nature is really just brought into this so-called committed relationship, whatever form that takes place. And that's, again, we see people being used. And so I know it's kind of a rudimentary example, but You know, our brains are wired to bond through sex. And so if you were to think about the ability for your brain to bond like a piece of tape, and you keep sticking that to other things, it's going to become less sticky over time. And because we're hardwired to bond through sex, and we have multiple partners, there's a bond created there that's really hard for that to go away, because it's hardwired to attach. And that's why, you know, people have confused feelings about their exes that they can't seem to separate from, and it causes all sorts of confusion in relationships, and it's really damaging. And do we really think that sleeping with multiple partners is going to help us be closer to our future spouse? I mean, it's just illogical, and it actually goes against science. And so when we think about what do we want out of a relationship, what do we want out of our lives and our marriages ultimately, you know, as this is directed and geared towards, we want to have a really good sex life in marriage. And so we have to rid ourselves of this selfish nature, and that is only possible and made possible by becoming a gift of oneself. Okay, well, if that's true, why do couples keep trying this approach? So I want to introduce a concept I call the thrill versus the mystery. And some of the stuff that I've been talking about is really about this thrill. And it's this erotic thrill separated, and we call that eros, separated from the agape, which is the self-giving type of love that we're striving for that orders the eros, which isn't a bad thing. But what's happened is people have become attracted to the sin of the thrill. And what I call when I say the thrill, I mean there's a sense of that it's wrong. And so when somebody looks at porn, they know that it's wrong, but it kind of gives them this exciting rush. Same thing when people have affairs, you know, or even some marriages are struggling that they think, hey, maybe I should tie you up in the bedroom and that'll spice up our life. And even having sex before marriage is a thrill, because there's something deep in our hearts that says, I don't think this is the best thing, but it gives me this rush that I'm now kind of addicted to, and that I keep seeking it. And really what's happening here is we're body and soul, but we're giving primacy to the body over the mystery of the soul. And these two are opposing forces, but we need to be careful about not saying that the body is bad, because the body is very good. And the Catholic Church gets a lot of heat because we say, oh, well, you guys are anti-body, anti-sex. That's not true at all, because what we're saying is that the soul needs to lead the body. You know, we don't need reasons for love. Love is its own reason. And so we've become addicted to this thrill, and by the time we enter into marriage and everything is sort of allowed, and it becomes very boring for these thrill seekers. And I think that's why most marriages fall apart, so they seek a new stimulus. But ultimately that doesn't work, and it ends in boredom and frustration, and they think, well, I need a new stimulus, and therefore a new person. And as we know, when we talked about love as a person, that person is never replaceable. And so they never really loved in the first place, it was only lust. So I know this is going to be the big kahuna of a question, but why should we wait till marriage to have sex? You know, one of the biggest reasons people will want to have sex before marriage is they want to find out if they're sexually compatible. And, well, I got news. If you're a man and a woman, you're sexually compatible. And men and women aren't compatible themselves. No two people are perfectly compatible. And you'll find that when you get married, no matter who you marry. But marriage is about taking the beauty of women and taking the beauty of men and joining them together so that you can share these qualities and become something greater than yourselves. And when I was younger, in my early 20s, I had this idea in my head that, well, you know, I'm going to have fun and I'm going to get caught up in hookup culture because who cares? And I didn't know the damage it was doing to me. You know, I didn't know the damage that objectifying women would have on me being able to love my spouse, and I'm still healing from that damage. And So when we talk about the decision to wait for your future spouse, this is something that I thought I had figured out that, well, you know what? What's the point of waiting? Because we're just going to be like the couples who did wait after their wedding night, and moving forward, we're all going to be the same. We're all going to have had sex. So who cares? Like, what's really the benefit? I'm just denying these impulses that I have. And I think that's, what ultimately I realized how the culture, how is that working out for them? Well, it's not. So I knew just in and of how much it's failed relationships and marriages today, that it couldn't be right. But reading, things like Fulton Sheen's 3 to Get Married was really what changed my perspective on this, because a couple that waits has something very unique, and this decision can only be made once. Because yes, you can always start over, but you can't start your sex life over. That's a gift that can only be given once. And so the difference that a couple has that they waited is that they have made this decision to place God's plan and God's desires above their own. And when you think about love and always doing what's best for your partner, is sleeping with that person really in their best interest when you haven't committed yourself fully to that person? And that's why the couple that waits is proving to God that I'm marrying this person for more than just their body. And now the marital act becomes a self-gift. Versus if you do it before, it becomes a taking. Well, because that's really the only reason you'd be doing it, is for pleasure. But now when you wait, now your sex life is more than just about pleasure. It becomes a renewal of the marital vows themselves, that I will love you fully, and it becomes a celebration and a joyful reenactment of this waiting. And so every time you have sex, you're really just celebrating this joyful gift of your body, because you put the dignity and the soul and the respect of that other person above your own, and it orders your sex life to that. And so that's why it's really, really important that, even if you've had sex in the past, you can start over for your future spouse, because that is something that cannot be undone. And you want the primacy of your love to be in the spirit through the body, not the other way around. And so waiting ensures that you're putting your love and getting God's blessing. I mean, a lot of people say, God's blessing, so what? God's blessing is everything, because that is the grace that orders your sex life to this endless love that everyone I know is looking for in their hearts. Because otherwise, it's this feeling of being full after having eaten. And that's why we see so many marriages fall apart. And we say, well, I don't love you anymore. And what that is really saying is, you don't give me the pleasure that you used to anymore. And how many couples have found themselves in that situation these days? I would say most all of them. Because who's waiting these days? Not many people. But we have to look at those couples. What do they have? What do these strong Catholic couples have that others don't? And when you hear their story, they say, yes, we waited. And every time we have sex, it's a joyful reenactment of that. I think what people enjoy is some words of encouragement. Do you have anything that you want to close out with? So here's a call to the men and women out there. And first up for the guys, if you're caught in this vice of lust, which is likely through pornography, just understand that the damage that you're doing to your future marriage, to your future spouse. Just think of the wife that God has picked out for you. And think about the standard that you're setting for her when you look at these pornographic women that aren't real. They're fake. The lighting and the makeup and what they do to their body, like no woman could ever live up to this standard. And if you think that your mind can just snap off from being attracted to all the things that you're seeing on Instagram or TikTok or through porn, just know that there's going to be a lot of healing and suffering to be had to order your love back to your future spouse. And it's, as someone who struggled with this, I don't want young men to have to go through what I did, because it's a painful process. And so get off of it, run as far away from you can, and start praying. Start praying to God to take that away from you so you can love properly and be free from it. And to the women out there, we live in a culture that thinks virginity is a losing thing because you're saying no to sex. But it's actually not true. It's a greater yes to God's plan, to the dignity of your body, that it truly is a gift. And you can see it in the words of the culture of how they think about virginity, because it's something that you lose. We say, I lost my virginity. And then what do guys say to one another? Well, I took her virginity. And is that what your body is worth? Something to be lost and taken? So if you have that, hold on to it. And if you did lose it, you can get it back. You can save yourself for your future husband, because I know there are guys out there who are praying, who are really trying and have made, this consecration to God, that their body is going to be meant to be a gift to one another. And so I challenge all couples out there to take the Catholic teachings on chastity, not as a rule to follow, but as God's plan, so that we can have a love that never grows old. Well, thanks to the fam for watching as always. If there's a topic that you want us to talk deeper about, then please comment down below and I'll be tracking that. And of course, please share this video, like it, comment, subscribe, you know the drill.